You can see the decline of faith among various age groups. On the left side, people who are over 65 usually identify themselves as Christians. The percentage goes down with each generation. For the youngest group on the right, only 60% identify themselves as Christians. Moreover, the entire climate of the country is changing for Christians. We've all heard about court decisions to prohibit prayer in schools and ban Christian groups from university campuses or remove religious displays from public property at Christmas. Those events make the news. Meanwhile, in the broader public, a hostility toward Christians is growing. Let's go back to that group of nuns, people who claim they have no religious commitment. The Barna Group found that in 1996, which is not so very long ago, 85% of the nuns still viewed Christianity favorably. They weren't committed, but they had an overall respect for Christians. That figure has taken a dramatic plunge among younger people who have no religious commitment. Just 13 years later, only 16% of those younger people had a favorable impression of Christians, and only 3% had a good impression of evangelicals. If you doubt this trend, I encourage you to try a test for yourself sometime. Go up to some casual acquaintances and ask a question like this. When I say the word Christian, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? Or what does the word evangelical mean to you? You better brace yourself because you may get an earful. When I've tried it, say with my seatmates on an airplane, I usually hear the word anti. Christians are anti-homosexual, anti-evolution, anti-abortion. The list goes on. Of course, those are important issues worth debating, but you can relax. We're not going to be discussing them in this series. Instead, we will focus on why so many people have a negative reaction to the Christian faith. Why doesn't it sound like good news? And then, what can we do about it? Where does all the hostility come from? To find out, we went to visit Gabe Lyons. As a student at Liberty University, which was founded by Jerry Falwell, Gabe had firsthand experience with Christians and their involvement in politics and the backlash that can produce. Later, he worked with the Barna Group to co-author a best-selling book called Unchristian: What a New Generation Really Thinks About Christianity and Why It Matters. He went on to write a second book called The Next Christians, and he founded a series of conferences called the Q Conference. They explore how to mobilize Christians to live out their faith in a healthy way. He made some conclusions about what we're doing wrong and how we can do it better.
Christianity's growth has not been happening in America. It's been in decline for the last 30 years. And so we're now in this moment where people are longing for something more, but the Christian story is not the one they're interested in. So this younger group of people basically see the church, Christianity, religion in general, as being really bad for the world. They think it's what's leading us to wars, to intolerance, to not being inclusive and accepting of other people. And so the church has to confront that head on and recognize that that's the perception that people have. That doesn't mean we as the church can change what we believe about the world, how we express what we believe, but we can be sensitive to the fact that we need to acknowledge where we've been wrong. What things have we turned into religion that had nothing to do with what Jesus was about? You think of the perceptions that have turned people away from church, being judgmental, being too political, being sheltered. None of this describes Jesus. This describes a religious structure. This describes more the Pharisaical church that Jesus had to encounter and confront, not the real church that Jesus was trying to build. To connect with a group of people that are pretty cynical about your faith, I think the next step is you want them to move from cynical to skeptical, and probably from skeptical to curious. And so one of our goals just has to be, what would make people curious about the Christian faith again? And I think the way we do that is we get back to the historic ideas that over 2,000 years have always made the Christian faith show up in society as something that's